Hello, friends. Boy, have I got a guest for you. Check Matt out.
Hi, I'm Matt Towner. In March 2009, I had a motorcycle accident in Thailand and basically died. I fractured my skull, my spine, my ankle, my knee, my shoulder, my elbow, broke 3 ribs, perforated my lung, and had a brain hemorrhage. All in the middle of nowhere, deep in the forest. It was classic Thailand. We were in the middle of nowhere, and yet people came from everywhere. I don't know where they came from, people were all around me. I knew I'd broken my back straight away. My friend said that I was open in 4 places. He didn't even want to see me or see me see his face.
There we go. Let's get into it. So Matt, you haven't done the Thailand thing unless you have a bloody motorbike accident, have you?
Well, yes, exactly, mate. When I had my accident there, I ended up I was doing a lot of research then at the time. Of course, I had a lot of time, 3 months in intensive care in a hospital there. But there, even then, it's 10 years ago now, March 2009. There was an Australian, let alone all the other countries that go there, that dies every day in a motorcycle in Southeast Asia. So you can only imagine, if you consider all the tourists from all over the world that are going to Southeast Asia, how many people die in those countries. Because the reality is, and I was really passionate about the time of trying to change that, but it's very hard to change the third world. That's sometimes the beauty of it, the danger. But they don't care whether you can ride a motorbike or you can't, whether you got a license or you don't. You know, you pay the money and off you go. And that's how I learnt to ride a motorbike. That's how a lot of people do. And you think you can just have a couple of near misses, but you can kill yourself real easy.
Yeah, I remember when I was in the Marines, the lads would go over to Thailand and they'd all get, is it like 500cc fire blades and
Yep.
and
Yeah.
everyone's
I
riding
was the same.
no
I had a
helmet, flip flops.
Oh, yeah, exactly. No shoes, no helmet, the freedom. But yeah, and in those days, especially, I never wanted to. There weren't even mopeds back when I first started going there, and scooters. And I always, still to this day, I prefer to hire a dirt bike because I do want to learn to ride properly. But it's not the place to learn to ride properly. Again, kids at home start learning properly as a kid, or go to professional trainers and learn how to do it properly, get a proper license, because those countries, it's the Wild West and it's Mad Max.
Yeah, absolutely. My brother lived in Bangkok for a few years, and he, I think to save time getting around, he ended up buying a motorbike. And
Yep.
obviously, no one was happy about it. But you know, it's kind of like when in Rome sort of thing.
Well, that's in Indonesia now. You can even get on a motorbike. You'll still hit traffic jams in Bali where you can't move on a motorbike. To be in a car, it's going to take you hours to get anywhere, because in some ways it's the only way to get around effectively is on motorbikes. But again, that then creates a bigger problem, because you've got the locals who are very, they're born and bred riding motorbikes and getting around in traffic. But then you throw into that equation then tourists who are wobbling their way around and getting in the way. It's just, it's a cluster all round. And some of those bigger cities, even bigger, Bangkok, a lot of the cities in Vietnam and Cambodia, and they've got their own set of road rules. It's sort of the biggest vehicle wins.
The problems come here though, Matt, because I don't know how much you know about the UK, but we're subject to massive illegal immigration and
Yep.
immigration full stop. And you'll be on the motorway or something, and there'll just be someone like stuck or overtaken up the inside, or stuck in the lane at 50 or something. And more often, it's an immigrant. It's someone from another country that
Yep.
that they've done their license over there, where they probably said, right, drive down the road and back. Yeah, there you go. And they come here and they get that lance. And we got a real strict driving test, probably a bit like yourselves. We got a theory test. You got to lift up the bonnet of the car and prove that you know, what's what, and you got to know the road signs and the road safety and the highway code and da 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 da. And of course, you can physically see here where someone's just gone, yeah, there's your, you know, Indonesian license, there's a UK one, and it's leading to rack and ruin. And I'll tell you why. I mean, I'll give you another example. Is it used to be in this country, if you heard blue lights or saw blue lights or heard a siren, you just got off the road like immediately, you know, because
that's what you have to do, isn't it?
Now you get these ambulances and they're stuck at traffic lights and they've got their siren saying, I need to get by, and they got their lights flashing, and you've got someone from Hong Kong sat there going,
yeah, just frozen.
You know,
Yeah. So many. Well, it is. I was just in London for the London Book Fair, and you can see that it's. And again, from there, I then went on to Paris, and that probably even more so. That just it's it just becomes so complicated for different people to, in some ways, the beauty of us all trying to live together can be one thing, but it's so complicated because people, again, moving to these big cities are coming from somewhere completely different with a whole different orientation, or as you said, even instructions and then even educations. And the integration's not easy.
Yes, exactly. I mean, you've traveled a lot, I've traveled a lot, and the beauty of traveling is you get to see the world from a holistic perspective.
Yeah.
A geographically holistic. You know, I drove to India and back once from Norway, and you physically see the climate changing, the land changing. You know, the green rolls into the desert, then it rolls into the jungle as you get further east, and one of the things you kind of realize, and I'm not trying to sound like, you know, a nationalist or something here, but a place like England has got such a history.
Yeah.
A history. I don't want to use the word civilization because obviously that's subjective, especially the way we've lived this last 3 years. But, you know, there's definitely like a thing. There's something there, you know, that you don't have in other countries.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, that must have been an incredible road trip because, yeah, you're going through a lot of different civilizations, again, for lack of a better word, in that trip from the north of Europe all the way down to, I always say everyone should go to India at least once in their life. It is another world. And it does make you realize how lucky we are, and in some ways how happy we should be, because in India, you'll see people who literally have nothing, like severe poverty, but still big smiles on their faces. That's what I always found beautiful about India. But, you know, it is, you know, now it's changed a lot, like everywhere. It's gotten gentrified. I used to live in India 30 years ago when I was a gem dealing gypsy, taking gemstones all over the world in the days before the internet, where jewelers needed gypsies like me to leave Australia with opals and go to Thailand and get sapphires, and Burma and get rubies. And India, I lived in Jaipur, which is one of the gemstone capitals of the world, and you could get all sorts of stones from there. And that's what, it's a whole town of gem cutters and gem dealers. And that was way before the internet. And but basically, I've never been as sick in my life as some of the Delhi belly, as we used to call it there, you know, days where you literally just stuck in a horrible little hotel, and that's probably a good word for them, and you're literally not leaving a toilet bowl because you're literally vomiting at both ends and almost wanting to die for days. But there's still a beauty in that country as well as the extremes of it.
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? I remember being in Bangkok and Pattaya.
Yep.
Bloody hell, what we talking, 91? What's that, Matt? That's 10,
yeah,
30,
well, that's
33 years ago.
Yeah, I was there. That was when I first went to Copenhagen. I had a jewelry shop on Khao San Road back then. exactly, in 91.
It really was.
I was a Wild West.
I had a Geordie mate in the Marines, and he'd been there on R&R. I think they'd been doing jungle training in Brunei or somewhere, and they'd got this week off, so they'd all gone to Thailand. And he just always used to say to me, Chris, man, it's a different world. And when I landed, I went there from Hong Kong actually, and which in Hong Kong was just an eye opener back then.
But again, two total extremes. Hong Kong, was quite advanced compared to what Bangkok was back then.
Yeah, I mean the smog in Bangkok, you could just about see your hand in front of your face, and as far as like the nightlife and all the girly bars sort of scene, it really was like anything goes.
It pretty much was, and as horrible, as horrific as this sounds to some of our listeners, but back then, 1991, you could literally buy a young girl for sex, and they could be killed, and that was $200. There were stories like that back in the day. Sadly, and in a lot of those countries, because in the villages, girls. This is a horrible conversation, really, but it's true. And thankfully, we're evolving as a human race. But they were sold because the boys could work on the farms. The girls couldn't. A lot of them were just sold off to Bangkok, which back then it was very much a sin city. It was basically, there was a trade. There was a whole slave trade as such, and then the sex trade in a lot of those countries, which really are. It was very crazy times. They were very crazy cities, and now they've become business centres. It's the last time I went back, Khao San Road, where I had my little jewelry shop, which was this little village really in Bangkok back then of artisans. Now it's like a shopping mall. There's KFC and McDonald's, and I didn't even recognise it, but it's gone big business, which again, I'm not sure which is better.
Yes, crazy times. Crazy. I've just shown a picture, a couple of pictures of me there back in the day.
Yeah. I know that you've done a lot, and what I do love about in what research I've done with you, and you can see on your website that you do a lot of stuff for charity, which I've been doing a lot of as well, mate. So I really appreciate what you do with some of the stuff that you've been doing there.
Oh, thank you, mate. Yes, it's to be honest, it's hand in glove, really.
Yeah.
As much as I've loved the travelling, I've loved the sort of extreme adventure sports as well, and extreme endurance is something I got into quite late on in life. And if you're going to run the length of the United Kingdom, sleeping at the side of the road, you may as well do it for charity, right?
100%. Yeah,
and I wouldn't do it for any charity. I think I've worked for a lot of charities, and they're all scams.
Yeah.
They're just corporate scams.
Well, the better that you can give directly to the source. A lot of the time when I'm trying to help the homeless, I'll literally go and, I do a big clean of my house. I'll go and make sure I'm giving blankets and clothes and everything that I don't want straight to someone on the street. I'll go straight to homeless shelters rather than trying to give them to St. Vincent de Paul, Lifeline, Red Cross. A lot of those places is just the fees that they charge, and in all the things that they take donations from gets absorbed.
Yes, I'm just showing friends at home. This is my Atlantic row. So I'm rowing the Atlantic in December. Thank you, Matt, for bringing this up so I can share this. We're going to be shining a light on mental health. We're actually a disabled crew, and a lot of people wouldn't understand that. And when I say disabled, I'm using the term, in its literal sense, that the three of us have disabilities. Mine is, not that I ever talk about this, but I'd say mine's probably complex PTSD, and all the addiction that I've been through on top of it, and still go through. My buddy Louis is recovering from chronic brain trauma. He really smashed his head, and he nearly didn't didn't make it. And Simon, our third crew member, he's got Asperger's, so he's got his own set of challenges. So, friends, all I'm trying to say is there's a link below. If you can chuck us £5, that would be wonderful. Matt, you're very kind talking about my story. This is the thing about traveling, is this, you know, and you must know this. Like, if I was to walk into my friend's house in the UK with 5 photograph albums under my arm, and I've done this, and I said, yeah, I've you know, Chris, where have you been? Oh, I've just been flew to America, and I took my pilot's license, and I took a plane and got my skydiving, you know, flew to a skydiving base and got my skydive license. Then I flew down to Mexico to fly to Havana, and I spent a week on Cuba with my girlfriend, traveling all around. And then we split, and I went down to Nicaragua and El Salvador, and I traveled every country in South America that I'd not been to before, ending up in Papillon's death cell in French Guiana.
Wow.
And I thought you guys might like to see some photo, and they're like, are there any photos of us? Well, no.
Yeah.
Well, we're not interested then. Literally, no, we're not interested. and it's just that funny thing, you know?
Yeah. People are so self-absorbed, you know. It is, and again, maybe we're generalizing that. I know for me, I'm very interested, always have been in travel. Travel is my drug, more than anything else. Any excuse to jump on a plane. And I've never been someone to just be able to go and lie by the pool. I don't go on holidays. I'm either going and either researching a book, writing a book, trying to create a podcast or a television series, or my background was also in organising events, and then in real estate, which I've done all over the world. In fact, all through my 20s, I took Australian opals all over the world. In my 30s, Australian wine. In my 40s, Australian real estate. And now in my 50s, I take Australian authors all over the world with my book series. So I'm always, but at the same time, it really, none of it has been for the money. It's been for an excuse to jump on a plane and go on an adventure.
Absolutely. And I want to cover all of this, Matt, but let's just think about this. So in the beginning, I showed your speech about your motorcycle accident, but there was an upshot. I didn't show the end of that video. You said something quite profound at the end about hearing your voice.
Yeah.
And what did it say?
Yeah, it was my voice, but it wasn't me. So whatever you believe, whatever your spiritual, religious, whatever belief, it was that resounding force that when I came out of my coma after 3 days, and I'm very lucky to be alive, it was, this is going to be the best thing that ever happened to you. And I truly believe that if I had had the opposite mantra of that as the first words I tell myself or I hear from above, I know people that have had a lot less accidents than me that are still in rehab, in drug addictions, still in complaining, in a negative thought pattern because of that. You know, doctors and specialists can't believe that I'm alive, can't believe I'm walking. You know, I broke every bone in my body from head to toe. I still have a metal spine, metal ankle, post-traumatic stress, mild brain damage. But I am very lucky. But a lot of that I do believe is because of my positive mindset that I had from the first moment I came out of that coma, because it would have been totally opposite had I had a negative mantra and then continue to have a negative mantra. And we all know those people. No matter what happens to you in life, it's not what happens, it's how you deal with it.
Yeah, we always say on this podcast, life doesn't do to us, we do to life.
100%. And I had this epiphany recently. Our only responsibility in life is to be happy, because, and if you're not, don't blame anyone else, because everything from divorce to world wars is because someone's unhappy and they're blaming somebody else. And we're still, unfortunately, in that position now. If you look at divorce rates for a start, are at 50% or more, and now we're looking down the barrel of World War III. And we're like, really? We haven't learned anything from the past?
Matt, why is it that Aussies are famous for backpacking?
Very good question. We are the biggest island in the world. It's been a big tradition, I think, that once we get through that, it's that sort of rite of passage to, you know, for me anyway, it was once I'd finished university. Literally, I didn't even stay for the hats in the air. My parents begged, borrowed, never stole to send me to a good school, and then encouraged me to go to university. I was the first towner to ever have a university degree. I did a film degree, which is a degree you do when you don't know what you want to do. Because I don't know anyone I know who's in the film industry actually just got in there and started working as a gaffer and worked their way up. A Bachelor of Arts degree, you do so little of everything that by the end you're not really experienced enough at anything to get a job in the film industry. But at the same time, it gave me a lot of insights into alternative thinking and philosophies. And then I jumped on a plane and travelled the world. I was literally a very different person, and I was a private schoolboy rugby player when I first left Australia. I was contracted to play rugby for San Diego. And then it was such an adventure that was it. I just wanted to travel the world, and I went all through America from there, and then flew to the UK and was supposed to play rugby in the UK. But by then, that's the last thing I wanted to do. I wanted to keep traveling, and I went all the way through Europe, ended up meeting this crazy Portuguese guy in the Greek islands who'd been smuggling gemstones back and forth from Asia to Europe. We got on famously, and I ended up working with him for 10 years, going all over the world, because back then, before the internet, the beauty of gemstones was every country has a stone that no other country has. And, the internet basically ruined the gem dealing trade, because then jewelers all over the world could Google and find the mines and get the stones sent. But before that, they needed gypsies like us to bring them gemstones from all over the world. And it was a great way to travel. Literally every country, you just keep trading, a bit like the trade routes of old, the Silk Road and all of that sort of stuff. So, yeah, it was a very different world, which a lot of my book series is about, the life of what it was like to travel back then before the internet, which had got a whole generation of readers to find that incredible. And yet at the same time, a lot of generation like us, it's then they get to remember what it was like.
Yeah, it's so funny. And again, people listening, I remember when, in Bangkok, you might find like one McDonald's. It was just, has this country got a McDonald's? Like Egypt had, like Cairo had one, and we're not obviously selling McDonald's here. But back when you were 20 years old, that's the shit that you ate, and
before we knew how shit it was.
Matt, tell us about so the gemstones.
Yeah.
There was a thing in Hong Kong, wasn't there, where they'd kind of get, let's just say, in this case in Hong Kong, it was gullible tourists to strap a load of gold to them in like a waistcoat and go through the airport. And when I worked for the 14K as their nightclub doorman, my fellow doorman, he was a South African guy, and he'd worked for the Triads for quite a number of years, and he used to say, Chris, why don't you, just ask the boss? Like, I'm like, ask him what? He says, gemstones out of here, gold to there, diamonds to... And I'll be honest, I was just like, yeah, I'm in enough I'm in enough trouble off my head in Asia as it is. That's probably going to add to my problems, but it is fascinating. So on a scale of illegality, as in if you get caught smuggling heroin, you could get the death sentence in some of these places.
100%.
How illegal is gemstones?
Well, that was sort of the beauty of it. Really, we were just avoiding paying tax. I used to carry 60 kilos of stones back and forth all over the world. And there was a whole teams of us doing that. At the same time, we were looking like backpackers, but that was sort of part of the trick, that literally you just looked like you were backpacking, and it was a cling and jerk to get that 60 kilos off the carousel, get through customs and get to the back of the taxi. Sometimes I had bruises on my arms just from cling and jerk and lift. But I remember one time flying from Bangkok to Amsterdam, because Queen's Birthday on Amsterdam used to be the opening of the summer season. If anyone's been, it's now King's Day, but the whole of Amsterdam is like a big market. It's like a flea market. And we'd get there, you'd have to get there days before to try and get the best spot, which back in those days was near the Bulldog Cafe and the Leeds Plain. And we'd literally be sleeping on the streets, protecting our spots, and then lay out all our velvet and put out all our stones. And sometimes you'd make 10,000, 20,000. Back then it was before the euro, but it was a guilder. So you'd just have a 3 days, you'd make so much money, and then go on from there to do all the festival circuit and go around door knocking jewelers and selling on the streets of Zurich and all the sort of Germany, all through Germany. But if you did, I was a bit of an expert at getting through airports, but I would never. And I knew a lot of people who did carry drugs, but I didn't see the point, because, like you said, you can literally go to jail or worse, death penalty. Whereas for me, it would have been a slap on the wrist. And a lot of time I would still have receipts for everything. It'd be, basically I was just avoiding paying tax and duties. We were basically just backpacking, but making 10 times more money. The amount of money we were making was ridiculous. But at that age, you just don't think about it. In your 20s, it's just an adventure, and you're just living life large. But yeah, Hong Kong was like because in those days China was pretty much closed. Hong Kong was almost like its showroom, and there were whole towers in Kowloon where you'd go and you could buy all sorts of gemstones. A lot of the time it was coming from all over the world, getting cut in China, and then you could buy everything just out of these big warehouse style apartment type office towers in Kowloon, and fly in and out. It was crazy times.
I'm chatting with Billy Hayes' management at the moment.
Yeah.
From Midnight Express.
Yeah.
I loved it. I mean, that film was incredible.
Yes.
Then I learned that it was a little bit sort of bashing the Turks because they weren't that bad to him, and he didn't escape by killing a guard. He got put on an island prison, and he swam to a boat, and he rowed ashore basically. I think he got into across the border into Greece. But yeah, I'm quite excited about that. But that moment where he's going through the airport and he's got all this hash strapped to him, and just by pure happenstance, they were checking that flight for. It was actually for like domestic terrorists or something, and he got searched, and that is your travel story nightmare, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. And again, it was a very different world back then. Before 9/11, that pretty much changed everything. Airports were so loose. That's what I was trying to say before in terms of flying. I remember one time into Amsterdam, again, just carrying 60 kilos of stone. So I wasn't sweating on carrying kilos of hash or all of the other sorts of things that people have carried all over the world, especially back then. But I got all the way to the airport, through the airport, and there was obviously some confusion at customs. I remember still having my passport in my hand, getting all the way to the taxi, and then taking the 60 kilos of gemstones, and no one had even checked my passport, let alone stop me for anything else. Whereas in this day and age, you've got to go through half a dozen checkpoints to get through any airport. Since 9/11, that changed everything. But yeah, I remember that movie very well. And interestingly, when I first left Australia as a private schoolboy rugby player, little did my godfather know at the time, he gave me this book called The Life and Crimes of Charles Sobhraj. I don't know if you know of Charles Sobhraj, but
it sounds like a book I want to read already.
Yeah, Richard Neville, an Australian journalist, wrote the book, but little did he know that within a matter of years, I would be living in Bangkok as a gem dealer, Charles Sobhraj was probably a decade before me. He was a Frenchman, very charismatic, and was not only selling diamonds and sapphires and rubies and pearls, just like I was, but sadly, one thing I also didn't do as well as not smuggling drugs. I also didn't murder hundreds of people. And Charles Sobhraj did. He's still in jail in India today. It's an incredible book, The Life and Crimes of Charles Sobhraj. And it's been made into a Netflix series called The Scorpion, which has been very well made. But it was the irony, the fact that my godfather gave it to me and I read it on the plane on the way to San Diego, because it really teaches you, and part of what we do in trying to tell our stories as you are, because I learned more in my first year of traveling than I did in 3 years of university. But no matter how charismatic someone is, you've got to be very careful. And that was what my godfather was trying to tell me.
I get it now. I saw this. I saw a glimpse of this on being advertised. I think it was on Netflix.
Yeah, it's very well done, The Scorpion. And Charles Sobhraj is still in jail today, but they still don't know how many backpackers he murdered. He lured many, many into his web in Bangkok. And yeah, he was luring them in to sell them diamonds and sapphires and rubies and pearls. And yeah, they never got out.
Geez, I think it's called The Serpent, is it not?
That's the serpent,
Yeah.
not the scorpion. The serpent, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, see, let's talk about that then, because, you know, it can be dangerous abroad.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been a bit too close to that, really, and I'm sure you have, Matt. I mean, in Hong Kong, the triads used to do something called a chopping.
Yep.
If you'd upset them, rather than just kill you straight out, they'd pile out the back of a transit van all with their meat cleavers, and they'd just hack you. And you know, they do that. You know, you only got to do that a few times, and you're in a bad way. And that actually happened to my fellow doorman, who was an English guy.
Yeah.
I won't say his name, but you know, and then, I mean, you know, I've lost. I say lost. My best mate drowned when we were in Portugal at a festival, and that was a bit. I guess what I'm trying to say is, people can be quite naive, can't they, when they travel?
And you just can't be. And that's, I think, that the moral to our stories, your podcast, my book series, and I suppose my whole thing is that if you look at any Indigenous culture, that's what they do. They pass down stories so that the next generation try to learn from mistakes before. But if you're going to get on a plane, and especially go to a third world country, you have to have your wits about you. You have to have your shit together, and you have to remember that every day. You can't get lackadaisical, especially in some of the cities that we've been talking about and some of the countries we're talking about. If you're going through South America or anywhere in Southeast Asia, Africa, India, you have to be careful all the time. And having said that, you know, again, being a foreigner in your country, London is one of the most dangerous cities in the world that I've been to. And, you know, in America, there are areas of LA, you know, you just don't go. The same in New York. London's shit can happen anywhere at any time. You've got to have your wits about you on the streets of London as well.
Yeah, my advice to anyone listening going travelling would be two things. And I will say, I've broken my own advice probably at every single opportunity. And the two things are, don't do drugs abroad, and don't go on the beach at night.
Yeah, and if you do both of those things, then you really got to take care. There's a lot of. There was a horror story from here in my little town, Byron Bay, Australia. There was a couple from here that went over there and broke both of those rules, and a policeman caught them. And I don't know what. No one to this day really still knows what went down, but because again, in those countries, it's a very different, corruption is the way it works. In India, they call it bakshish. Basically, if you get in trouble with police, you pay as much money as you have to that first policeman to get out of that trouble. Because if you get back to the police station, you got to pay the whole police station. You get to court, you got to pay the whole police station and the whole courthouse. But for some reason, it went worse than that. And this Aussie guy was protecting his girlfriend in some way, shape, or form, and he accidentally killed the policeman. They then stupidly, instead of running straight to the Australian embassy, hid, buried. It became a very big issue. They got caught. I think they're still in jail right now in Bali, which again isn't a fun jail to be in. But it went horribly wrong one night on the beach. Obviously, wrong place, wrong time, and then they didn't deal with the situation very well, and then continued to make it a bigger and bigger drama. And then it's because I know she'd left 2 kids here. The father of the children didn't even know she'd gone on holidays, and she was on this sort of romantic getaway with a boyfriend, and now she's in jail in Bali from a night on the beach that went very wrong.
Yes, awful. We had a situation when I served on an aircraft carrier for a year, and we sailed to Barbados. And I always say to this day, not only was it not work, it was just one of the best trips of my life. You're actually sailing to Barbados, and it was
great.
And when we got there, I just had such an utterly brilliant time. I started seeing we were the first ship to have women on board, and
naval officers.
We had naval officers. Then you had Wrens, which people listening might think that's the same. It's not. A naval officer is different from a Wren. Don't ask why. Yeah, we had no all military, but well, I mean, I'll tell you this. So we had this. I always remember she was a surgeon or a doctor, and she was lovely, and she used to go there for I don't know, check up, and she'd feel your balls and make some funny comment or so, and everyone loved her. She was, and when you went ashore, she went with the ranks, the ratings. She didn't go with the hoi polloi. She was a real good girl. And one night, someone crept into her cabin with a ball peen hammer, smacked her over the head 10 times, obviously in an attempt to kill her. That was a weird situation. But in Barbados, like I say, I was seeing one of the girls on the ship, and we got one of those mini mokes, and we just travelled around the island, just getting absolutely smashed, and either sleeping on the beach, which, like I say, is not a good thing to do, or getting a cheap backpacker or what. They weren't even called backpackers back then, just a cheap room.
Yeah.
And
hostel at best.
It was incredible, and doing all the water sports and everything. That's on the beach, folks, not with the Wren. That's another story again. But no, one of the girls in my first aid party. So when the ship goes to action stations, like stuff's coming in to go bang, you all have an action station. Mine was a first aid party, and one of the girls in it, she was lovely, and one day in Barbados, I was walking past the sick bay, and I glanced like that, and through the sort of gap in the door, I could see, I won't say her name, but I could see she was sat on a bed with a dressing gown on. And I looked and I thought, she's got the flu or something, isn't she? She's popped down to sick bay because she's not very well. And then I learned the next day, she'd been seeing one of the stokers on the ship, so one of the guys from the engine room, and they'd gone out for a romantic meal and decided to walk along the beach afterwards. and a local chap come out with a machete and said, right, give us everything you've got. And the matlow was like, yeah, just take it, mate. Just leave us alone. And he said, right. And then and then he points a machete at him and says, now I want your woman.
Oh, wow.
And the matlow's like, oh, no. And she was just like, no, just let him do it. She was worried for their lives, obviously. So, yeah, he obviously, he rapes her right in front of this matlow. They were both freaking traumatized, obviously. She then got a load of shit for. This was the story I was told. She left the Navy because she got so much shit for not being able to handle it at sea. So, give you a little idea what service mines can be like. But this is the thing, isn't it? Koh Phangan. Sorry, just another little anecdote. Full moon party, isn't it? Koh Phangan.
Yeah.
The next day, I was one of the last people on the beach because I was still waiting for my speedboat to come in and take me back to Samui. And I was stood on the cliff thinking, bloody hell, it'd be great to smoke a joint now. But I didn't know anyone. I didn't know anyone with any weed. And as I stood there, all these people were like skinning up on the rocks, looking out to sea and I looked around and there was all these undercover police officers just lined up down the sort of cliffside, and they were just waiting for gullible tourists to roll a joint, so they could go down, arrest them, and extort the money out of them.
A lot of that because they can get more money out of a tourist than their whole year's salary.
Yes,
and it still happens to this day in those countries. It's a different. And you just have to understand that that's the way those countries work. So, as I said, in India, it's called baksheesh. It still happens in Indonesia. It still happens in Thailand, a lot of countries. And you just have to be very aware of that. They'll even do roadblocks where they'll stop every motorbike, every car, and basically just looking for some excuse if you're not wearing a helmet or, whatever it may be, searching cars, looking for anything. A mate of mine in Copenhagen just recently, they found a vape, not a pot vape, not anything else. It was nicotine, but vapes are illegal. Funnily enough, the rest of everything else is now legal in Thailand. It's like Amsterdam, but vapes are actually illegal, and they threatened that he'd be going to jail overnight for a vape, and he just had to pay. And it's, again, then you just got to haggle as to how much money you've got in your wallet, but they'll often take you to an ATM and try and extort more money. You just it's all a negotiation.
It's gone mad, isn't it? Because was it under Thaksin Shinawatra they outlawed drug use and people were getting 12 years in prison for smoking a joint or something. Now they've gone the other way and they've made it all legal.
Yeah, they let a lot of people out of jail in Thailand when they did open up the floodgates and make everything legal. And last time, I've been in Thailand a lot. I've been going there to Copenhagen since 1991, pretty much every year. I was there again for the whole month of February. It's my birthday month. I'm always there. Some mates of mine have opened a cafe there called Foxy's, which is in Copenhagen. And it's a great place and I love it. But yeah, now you can go everywhere from a 7-Eleven to a fine dining restaurant, and you can buy gummy bears and lollipops and cookies, and the tourism industry has boomed for that reason. And they're finding that they've got a lot less aggravated assault issues, obviously a lot less drunk and disorderly. It's been a positive influence on the Thai economy and on the tourism industry. And funnily enough, other countries now like Indonesia and all sorts of countries now looking at that and seeing the sort of money they're making, because let's be honest, government's only thinking about money. But if Indonesia then drops all those laws. There are people in Indonesia who've done 20 years for drug offences related to marijuana. So it'll be interesting how they're going to reverse some of those.
Yeah, my mate Matt, that is actually, I've been flashing my book up because there's a chap in my book called Lee Ames that was kind of a bit of my nemesis in Hong Kong, and I messaged him recently and I said, "How's your nightclub going?" Because he had a club in Pattaya, and he went, "Screw that, Chris. I'm in the weed business now." And he's opened up. He's got like 30 of these weed cafes over there, or so. It just seems to have.
Well, yeah.
I don't suppose you know him. He's called Andy James.
I know the name. Yeah.
He's
I
he's
don't
called.
know.
Sorry, he's got a different name in my book, but
Yep.
yeah, no, I just wondered.
Yeah, the same in my books. All the names have been changed to protect the guilty.
Matt, before we come on to the travel tales in your book, what scrapes have you had traveling? What risky moments have you had?
I suppose. Well, the motorcycle accident was the most death-defying, I suppose. But 10 years way before that. It's funny that I've probably done a lot crazier things than riding a dirt bike without a helmet and a shirt or shoes, and just going way too fast. I was 40 years old, pretending I was 14, really. That's the moral of that story. But, I smuggled gemstones all over the world for 10 years and never really had any trouble. I have a lot of friends who did get in all sorts of trouble. I've had mates of mine, a mate of mine who's one of the stories. Once I got picked up by an international publisher, I then encouraged any mates of mine who I knew also were aspiring authors and had good stories to submit their stories. And Nick Taylor, who's a local, also here from Byron Bay, but an international DJ, was DJing at a party in Bali, which then the police raided the party, and he'd forgotten all about it. He had one ecstasy pill in his pocket. And that what they do when they raid those parties, and a lot of the time, again, they're just looking for money, but they basically just search everyone, and he forgot all about it, didn't even think of it. And for one ecstasy pill, again, he wasn't in a position. It was a whole SWAT team type raid to just pay one policeman to, let him off. We all had to chip in and pay $75,000 to get him out of Grobogan jail in Indonesia for that one ecstasy tablet, which again, it's a very different world. But and even more so, I suppose, than that, when we were doing the gemstone thing, as I said, the worst that would happen is which did happen to a Colombian friend of mine, who, when we were coming back and forth from Hong Kong, actually, because we were buying these gemstone donuts. Anyone our age might remember them. They came in every sort of stone, and you put them on a bit of leather and wear them around your neck. The Chinese wheel of life, we used to call them. But they looked like a donut, and they were in rose quartz or amethyst or quartz crystal, every different stone. And we were selling them all over the world, and doing very well. But we were all coming in and out, just carrying backpacks full of these. And Bangkok airport, you might remember, it had that sort of mezzanine. You'd come down these escalators, and customs were down the bottom. And there was 4 of us on the plane, and we all used to travel separately, and we weren't in a pack. And I just remember hearing the sound and turning back, and it looked beautiful because his backpack had burst, and there was this whole waterfall of every different coloured gemstone coming down the escalators. But of course, customs took him aside, and they just basically took everything off him. They left him enough money to come back to Khao San Road, our office, as we used to call it, and he'd lost his whole 60 kilos worth of stones he'd brought back from Hong Kong, and they took every cent out of his wallet, just enough for a cab fare to come back to us. And so we all chipped in and lent him money to go back to Colombia, where he was from, which of course is famous for emeralds, as well as a couple of other products that are even coffee and cocaine, which are both highly addictive. But the emeralds are a beautiful stone, and he was from Colombia, and this is how dangerous some of those countries are. So we'd all chipped in and given him $40,000. He gets off the plane, he goes straight to a mine, he buys $40,000 worth of emeralds. And again, in hindsight, a bit of a rookie mistake. He let the mine called a taxi to take him back to the airport. And then in the taxi, halfway to the airport, the taxi driver just turned around and said, "Give me the emeralds." It was just a total setup straight from the mine. And they dropped him to the airport again. He flew back to Bangkok again, totally empty-handed. And it had happened twice. And then third time unlucky, which I was not involved in. We didn't all chip in again. It was like, no, you're on your own now. So he then did the stupidest third time unlucky, went back to Colombia and did try to take one of their other famous products then to Switzerland, and he got caught going into Switzerland with kilos of cocaine. And I imagine he'd be out by now, but because that's a long time ago. And a Swiss jail certainly wouldn't be as bad as an Indonesian or a Thai jail, but certainly it's the loss of freedom is what you don't want to risk going to jail. So that was probably one of there were stories that happened around me, but I've always been smarter and luckier enough that the worst that happened to me was, again, as I said, a motorcycle accident that still I survived, and I can still continue to try and spread the message of staying positive.
Yeah, I'll tell you a couple of funny ones. My uncle, he's no longer with us anymore, but he lived in Phuket for a number of years. Really unfit, died of, ill health really in the end. And he come back to the UK once, and I remember he pulled out his pocket. He had this white tub. It was that big. And he opened the top and he showed me. It was full of weed. And I said, how did you bring that back? And he said, I just had it in my pocket. I'm like, you went through Thai security with a Tupperware pot full of weed in your pocket? And he went, yeah. I said, weren't you worried weren't you worried you'd get caught? He said, well, they searched me. I'm like, what? He said, yeah, the woman pulled me to one side and they searched me. And I said, what about the weed? He said she lifted up the pot, opened the lid, looked in and went, and gave it back to me. The other thing I was going to say, I'm just showing a picture of it, is one of the bizarrest things in my life is I became friends with Adrian Simon back along. It was a few years ago now. And he's the son of Warren Fellows.
Okay.
Who's a very famous Australian. For friends looking, this chap here was Warren Fellows. He was probably one of the most famous Australian drug smugglers because he got caught in Bangkok and did 12 years in the Bangkok, the big tiger.
Yep. The Bangkok Hilton.
Yeah, the Bangkok Hilton. And years later, his son has written a couple of books, and we hooked up through like writing books, basically.
Okay.
Oh, but The Damage Done. Have you read it, Matt?
No, I have heard of it.
Oh, back in the day, it was like one of the backpacker books that everyone. There was always a copy left in a backpacker somewhere.
Yeah. Like Shantaram.
Yes, yeah. Yes. So the stories in your book, then, can you enlighten us to a few?
Yeah, I started. This was my first book, Traveller's Tales, Adventure Travel Stories with a Sense of Humour, and then I got picked up by an international publisher, and then that expanded the books into these two: Abroad, Broken, Busted, and Crazy Shit in Asia. And we were in airport bookshops all over the world before COVID, and then COVID shut them all down and pretty much bankrupted the publishers, and it's back to square one. But yeah, they're all short stories, and they are. The reason I got picked up by the international publisher, because you might remember a UK series called Banged Up Abroad, which was a TV show, which was all stories about people who ended up in foreign countries in jail, and a lot of times for things that they didn't do. And the publisher, the international publishers, had been pitching Banged Up to try and turn it into a book series, and Banged Up said, "No, we're a TV series. We're not interested." So then they got my pitch and my first book and said, "Well, this is great. It's even better because not everyone ends up in jail. Someone ends up in love. Someone ends up near dead. Someone face to face with a grizzly bear." So yeah, just adventure travel stories with a sense of humour. Even Nick Taylor's story of being banged up in Bali, his story is one of the best in all of the books because he's a very good writer for a start. He's a PhD in literature as well as an international DJ. But in Crobacan prison, which is a horrible prison to be in, and he was there for 3 months before we could haggle to get him out of there, which cost us 75,000 US dollars. But they do this thing like Crobacan Idol, and him being a DJ, he put together the music, and he and his two cellmates who did the sort of Run DMC dance moves, they won Crobacan Idol while he was in there, which is a very funny story. Which just this morning I've had by phone meetings with producers in Hollywood because I'm looking to now take the book series to a TV series, and they loved Nick's story more than most of the others. That was sort of their number one, and my story they're talking about doing first off the back of Baby Reindeer, which you may have seen and heard from the Edinburgh Comedy Festival, that then became this Netflix sensation that's gone global, because my story has similar twists in that when I had my motorcycle accident, during that 3 months while I was came out of a coma, and then I'm having to learn to walk and talk again because I had fractured and broken everything in my body and was very lucky to be alive. A girl who I went on a first date with just before leaving flew to be at my bedside, which at first I thought was either very sweet or very weird. But she basically was trying to coerce me into this Ponzi scheme, network marketing, Scientology-based cult, which she ended up taking me out of the hospital in a wheelchair and onto a seminar speaking circuit to try and spruik this pyramid scheme that was all about making money. And when the morphine started to wear off and I started to realize that things weren't right, she then became very nasty, and the plot thickens, which is all. You'll have to read more about that in The Broad Broken Busted, because it's about me being busted up and then having to go through the legal systems, not because of doing anything illegal, but because of this crazy woman that then tried to do. It's something now that it's going to. We're looking at turning that into a Netflix series. So that was a meeting I had this morning.
Matt, it sounds like it's flying for you. I'm really happy.
Yeah, we're getting there. It's been a process, as you would know with your books and with your podcast. Any artistic pursuit is a labour of love, whether that's music and books or whether it's podcasts or art. And it seems to be getting harder and harder. The powers that be are putting more and more funding into education for people to just toe the line and become doctors, lawyers, engineers. The arts is getting less and less funded. In more ways than one, whether that's from a school level to a university level to even now to try and get creative projects up. Any of my friends in the music and the events industry are having a very hard time, and I know how hard it's been to get my book series back up and running again since COVID killed it, basically. It's not an easy process, but when you have an artistic pursuit, it's something that just won't let you sleep. You have to get it going.
Yeah, if you think about it, look at the way the future's going. You got young people, and no disrespect to young people, but today their entertainment is Instagram. You know,
Yeah,
scrolling, isn't it? Just scrolling through endless, you know, facile dribble. And this is the thing with the podcast, Matt, and I say this. So if there's anyone still watching this podcast, give yourself a big pat on the back. And the reason I say that is I started this podcast because I love life. I genuinely love life. I love exploring. I love adventuring. I love people. You know, there's been lots of things I've loved that I'm trying no longer to do, but you know, it's all been like I just want to be out there, you know, and I wanted to just share these kind of stories because it's only through getting a holistic picture of life that you can fulfill your own reason for being here.
Sure.
And yet, geez, it's people are not in. I mean, I'm generalizing here, but people are not interested, Matt. You know,
well, I did a film degree, and so now it would be that's a long time ago. I'm 55 years old now. I was 21 when I graduated, jumped on a plane before I even waited for the graduation ceremony. But even back then, if you looked over generations, you know, our grandparents sat by the fire and read books. Our parents, and we're old enough to remember, got the first TVs because before that was a big night out to go to the cinema. You know, you'd go on to a date and you'd take a girl to the cinema or to the drive-in. And then the TV came out, and that was a big revolution. But then the big change going from movies then to sitcoms. So that format went from a book that would take you days or weeks to read to a movie that would take an hour or two to then half-hour episodes. Now, exactly, people's attention spans are so much shorter because the medium has changed so much. And it went then to YouTube videos, and it said now it's TikTok. So you've got to capture people's attention within 30 seconds, not 30 minutes or 3 hours. I don't know that's great for the movement of minds over civilizations and generations.
No, it's not going in. It's not exactly going in a good direction for authors, for filmmakers, for podcasters.
I don't even. And again, even when I got picked up by the international publishers, I didn't even have an Instagram, which was unheard of. Sadly, a lot of big publishers now, that's the first thing they want to see before they even look at your pitch or your content is how many followers you have. I do have an Instagram now, which is at Matt Towner Travel Writer. But I have Facebook, which I don't have children, but I'm the godfather of 9 and the uncle of 6, and they all say, "Oh, that's just for old people." Facebook, but have you got TikTok? No, and I don't want it. I've never looked at it. I don't even want to know what it is because, again, from what I understand, it's 30-second video clips that people get down this rabbit hole of watching for hours. And the fact that someone told me the other day there is some guy on there, Mr. Beast, who's a billionaire out of making these ridiculous TikTok videos about mindless shit. It's a crazy world.
Yeah, I always gave my little lad sort of free rein to learn technology. What I thought getting him a tablet when he was about 4. I know all it was is I didn't want him to struggle with technology like our generation have had to. You know, my dad can't even use a mobile phone. You know, and he's, you know, he's like 70 now, and I've got 70-year-old relatives that they use WhatsApp. They do, but my dad's just like it frustrates him. It makes him upset, and so I thought with my little boy, you know, get him a tablet. Let's get him understanding, you know, what is Microsoft, what is Windows, how does it work, what is an application, how do you change the brightness, and to a degree, you know, that's kind of work. But then also to another degree, I go in the front room and he's watching this facile crap on YouTube. And I'm like, son, I've asked you before, turn it off. This stuff,
Yeah.
you know, you've got 35-year-old men who,
Yeah.
and they haven't fought in the military. They haven't, like, you know, been in brothels
Yeah.
in Thailand. They haven't. I'm not saying that's the mark of a man, folk. I'm just saying these are like mummy's boys. They're 35 years old,
Totally.
and all they do is they go to the B&Q, you know, their hardware store, buy a load of crap. None of them know how to use power tools because they're all pansies. And so they get all this gaffer tape and they make these stupid shit, right? You know, they're grown men firing Nerf guns at each other from these stupid towers that they've built out of, you know, plywood and gaffer tape, right? And then, and I say, son, do you know what happens to all this stuff that they've just spent all this money buying? It gets trashed and taken down the dump, the tip. You know, that's it. All that plastic degrades down and ends up in the rivers, and then ends up in the sea, and ends up in your generation's fish. You know, and he doesn't like it. There have been a few tears, and I have apologised if I've been a bit shouty to him, but it's just like I grew up on Tarzan. Good racist bloody white supremacy stuff, you know. I meant, sorry, what did I just? No, what I meant, you know, good hero like Tarzan.
Well, he had a good, good intentions. It's funny when you talk about plastics. The last time I was in Indonesia, I went to this temple to see this incredible waterfall, and in Indonesia that they have so much worshipping of the nature, as they should, but it's so hypocritical, because then to the other direction, when I look behind me, you look at this beautiful waterfall, and then on the other side of the mountain there's exactly the same sort of waterfall, but it's all plastic that's coming down the mountain, because up on the high road somewhere they've decided that's where they'll just back trucks up and just let the garbage out, and just literally it's just as big a waterfall as the water on one side is plastic on the other side, that's clogging all of the rivers all the way through Asia, really. Bali's gotten so bad now, you jump in the ocean, you'll come out covered in plastic bags. And a lot of the time, that's where a lot of the disease is coming from. And the irony is that, you know, only a generation ago, everything was, you know, food was even served in banana leaves. And you can just throw the banana leaf away after you finish eating it. But they were introduced to the plastic bag, but either no one told them, and now they're not willing to learn the fact that they'll actually serve you something in a plastic bag, put it in another plastic bag, and then give you a carry plastic bag, and then still wonder why all the rivers are clogged with plastic.
Yes. Looking at the bright side, at least we got to travel, Matt, before all the COVID bullshit and before all the plastic and before all the, you know, McDonald's and I think we should be eternally grateful for that.
Oh yeah, and I think every generation thinks they had the best time to travel, but I certainly think that we lived in one of the best times. The freedom that we had before social media. You know, now there's cameras everywhere, no matter what you do. Australia, we're becoming the most over-regulated country in the world. You want to do anything, you've got to fill out 15 different forms and pay all these different fees, and then there's cameras and rules and regulations everywhere for everything. And whereas, you know, I spend a lot of time in third world countries, which are now obviously much more evolved than they were when we were first going there, whether that's Thailand or Indonesia or South America. But I have friends who have construction companies in those countries, and there's still a brown paper bag on site at all times. When a government official comes and says you can't do that, they get handed an envelope and they go away. And that's just the way it works. But sometimes those countries seem to get more things done that way than we are now, with all of the rules and the regulations. that seem to be hampering us. So somewhere in the middle is the happy ground, which is the same in everything.
Absolutely. Matt, we're going to put a link for your book below this video. So friends, grab a copy of Matt's book or books, and start.
Down a travel writer, you'll find me there. And certainly as we start going into a podcast series and a television series, I'll keep you posted, mate.
Yeah, absolutely. If you want any guests for your podcast, mate, you just say the word. I got a couple of. All my stories are a bit tragic. Well, not all of them, but yes.
Mate, you've got a good sense of humour and you've got a very positive attitude. And mate, I do really admire the things that you do. So keep on keeping on, brother.
Yes, thank you, Matt. Very kind you say. Matt, stay on the line. I'm just going to click all the record stuff off, and I want to thank you properly. But for the purposes of the recording, massive thank you so much. Give my love to Australia, mate.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, God's country, literally. And always welcome back on the show. Let's have another.
I'll keep you posted how it all goes.
Yeah, please do. Please do. Brilliant. Stay on the line, Matt. Friends at home, hope you've enjoyed this as much as I have. I'll just say here and now, this is a podcast, folks. This is why I speak as well, right?
Yeah.
If you leave a comment saying, and Chris just interrupts it's like you want the BBC, you want like some old interview system that
we're having a conversation.
Yeah. This is like if we're in a bar.
The new generation don't know what that is.
No, well, the old generation, they think that I'm just going to sit here like a muppet, you know, with like 10 questions. And the whole reason I started the podcast, Matt, is, you know, I want to share my experiences, you know, and I want to hear your experiences. I want to see where they meet in the middle. I mean, we now know that we both lived in Hong Kong. We've both taken things through airports that we probably shouldn't have done.
Yes. Sharing stories is how we people learn.
We're both authors, and we didn't even speak about that, but that's a whole nother thing again, isn't it? You know,
totally, mate.
So brilliant.
We'll do that another time for sure.
Friends, if you can like and subscribe, that would be brilliant. If you want a link to get involved with my Atlantic Row, there's a link below in the description. Thanks for everyone who's chipped in a £5. I think I've said enough. Much love.